this friendship series, and hopefully that this has been a reminder to you, but also hopefully you've learned some through this as well. So you may think that you're a good person and that you're the best friend that anybody can have. If you think that, you're wrong. I'm just going to tell you that right now. But have you ever had your character put to the test within your friendships? In those situations, you discover the areas in your life that you need improving, that maybe you excel at, or also the areas that you don't excel. And so everybody can improve in some capacity, in some way, some shape, some form. No one is absolutely perfect. I know I am not. Oh shoot. He thought it. Oh, maybe it was just Allison. I knew it was one of them. So somebody, I could feel the gears working. I could hear it. But as you continue to grow, you continue to learn, and it's very possible to learn something new every single day, especially when it comes to our friendships and how we can do better in those. So we're going to actually hit one of my favorite Bible lessons today, but this is not one that we typically cover beyond like VBS or Children's Church, and I'm not really sure why, we just don't. We're going to briefly hit it. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of it. But I found this interesting as I was getting ready for this lesson. I found a HuffPost lifestyle article that was put out on March 23rd of 2016, so it's a little aged. But it said that people who have good friends have less tension, they suffer less from stress, they have stronger defenses, and they live longer. That's odd to me. But when was the last time that you helped a friend get through a difficult situation, difficult time, by being positive or encouraging them, maybe giving them a smile? Anybody? Nobody? Bueller? Brooke?
It's been a while.
It's been a while?
It's been a while.
When was the last time?
College.
Last semester?
Yeah.
Okay. We probably have. You know, it's not one of those that we, if you're sitting there just going, ooh, I encourage somebody and write that down in your book, you probably aren't a great friend. So the fact that you're not remembering all those is not necessarily a bad thing. Because if you're all about me, myself, and I, that is different. What about those of you who's had somebody? What's the last time that somebody else spoke encouragement into your life? Anybody?
Yes.
When's the last time though?
When was the last time I talked to you?
You did.
Right now.
Last week?
Years ago?
That's why.
Thursday?
Thursday, potentially?
Yeah, I feel
Okay. So are you the person that tells jokes and keeps all your friends laughing? Or are you the negative Nancy in the group? And you can be a dude to be a negative Nancy, Corbin.
Okay, there's a story to this.
What?
So I've been getting checks
Nancy.
and envelopes that say Nancy, they're crossed out and my name underneath. Long story, but now they
He's
call me
Nancy
Nancy now.
from Arkansas. Nancy.
Negative Nancy from Arkansas? Okay. I'm just gonna call you double N. Negative Nancy.
Not name Nancy, just Nancy.
Just Nancy.
No, I like negative though.
My ancestors.
Nancy. Wow, that's
You
not
gotta
even
say-
Nancy.
you
It's
gotta say it
Nancy.
like that.
Nancy.
What?
Yeah, that's like my son. I want my milk. I'm like, what is going on? You are not that southern, bud. Milk?
Milk?
Yeah.
How you say it?
Yeah, maybe he was hanging out with the vulture. For those of you that didn't go on a mission trip and weren't in my group, we had a girl from Texas, and it was not a hillbilly accent, but it was a very, 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 very southern accent, and I very much so picked on her for it. Also, we chose animals that went with our name, and she was Victoria the Vulture, and so for most of the week I just called her Vulture. But She had a very southern accent. It was fantastic and easy to pick on. So I bullied her. Yeah, she was my Jaden for the week. I picked on her, or Allie, whichever. But so we can be the person that is encouraging our group. We can be the person that's making our group laugh, or we can be the negative one. Nobody really wants to have that negative person. Hopefully you are not the person that when you show up, everyone hates to see you come around and like, oh great, George is here. Like, hopefully that is not you. And so let's look at Mark 2, verse 4. As we look at this, you'll probably be familiar with this. Since they were not able to bring him to Jesus because of the crowd, they removed the roof above him, and after digging through it, they lowered the mat on which the paralytic man was lying. So, again, this is one of those stories that we don't really cover it much as students and as adults, but it's one that is often covered in VBS, in children's church. I don't really know why that is, but we just don't tend to cover it once we get past like 6th grade. And so this dude, he's paralyzed. He has to be carried around everywhere. This has got to be really difficult in that timeline because they don't have wheelchairs. So he has what they would call a litter, and they would carry him around on the litter. And if he needed to go somewhere, whether that was to the market, to the bathroom, to the synagogue, although he couldn't go very far into the synagogue because he would have been seen as unclean because he's an invalid, he would have needed somebody to carry him. He's completely paralyzed. From our understanding, he can talk and see, and this part works, but nothing else does as far as we're aware. So, how many of you would be willing to carry one of your friends around on a stretcher all day? Like, I'd carry that specific one, but I'm not carrying Bryce because he's heavy, right? Bryce be fluffy, and I'm out. Brooke's like, I tried, I'd get you. I'd have to have 8 friends carry me. But on this particular day, Jesus was in the temple. He's teaching, he's healing people, and there's an enormous crowd, so much so that nobody else could get into the temple, right? And so the paralyzed man, he had 4 good friends who carried him around, and they were outside of the temple. They were trying to get in just like everybody else. And so they carried him to the right, they couldn't get in. They carried him to the left, they couldn't get in. They tried to go through the front door, they couldn't get in. And so there was simply no way that they could get past all the people. And they probably were like, hey, excuse me, pardon me, and people just kind of blocked them, right? And so the friends, they went back to the temple. They laid their friend on the stretcher on the ground. They began climbing up the building wall until they reached the roof. Now the Bible doesn't give us all the details of this, and I'm giving you the Cliff Notes, the Bryce Standard version here. But it's safe to assume that there is probably a ladder involved. They carried their friend on his bed to the top of this building, which I don't know about you, but if you've ever carried a litter up a wall, up a ladder, it's very hard, very difficult. I did it a lot in the military for training because we had to train like you fight, right? And so we often had to carry litters through an obstacle course, and you had to get them over walls and things like that. Not fun. And you would typically either have somebody actually strapped to the litter, or we would have a dummy. It was more fun when it was a real person. As long as you weren't the real person. That had happened, and that was not so fun. Well, again, at that time, like 230 pounds, still not fun to carry. And like they had like strap around the head and like straps, like you're not moving, you're stuck. It was kind of fun, but it was also always hot. But so not only did they cut a hole in the roof, they also they used some ropes, chains, clothes, we don't know, to tie stuff to this litter and drop him down through the roof of this sanctuary. And Jesus, he was amazed by their faith, and when he saw this paralyzed man, whose name is never given to us, we don't know his name, he sat down or dropped down slowly by his bed, by his 4 friends, and Jesus says, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now, it's one thing to be a paralyzed man who received forgiveness of his sins and is ultimately healed of his ailments, but it's another to be that type of friend. Do you have that type of friend, or are you that type of friend that will walk through life with you, that will carry you, that and I'm not necessarily saying like legitimately carry you on a litter, but that will walk through your mess with you. When the times get tough, are you the friend that sticks around, or do you get out? See, the Bible says nothing more about these friends. But let's think about it. So this dude, he may have never have come to Jesus, have never gotten to Jesus, if it hadn't been for his friends, correct? He may not have been forgiven. He may not have ever received healing if his friends didn't go that extra mile, literally carry him up on top of a house and drop him through a roof, which sure that made some people mad. They're cutting a hole in the temple roof. But his friends, they were silent heroes in this story. It's because of their faith that this guy's life was completely changed. Now, when God said in Genesis chapter 2 that it was not good for man to be alone, he wasn't specifically saying just in a marriage context. He's saying that mankind, we're not supposed to be alone. We're not supposed to go through life alone. We need companions to do that with us. He's not just saying that I have to have a wife. He simply means that it's not good for me to be by myself. Alone, lonely, miserable, with no one to talk to. Many of us are having flashbacks to spring of 2020, right? Some of y'all were like, I kind of liked it for a week, for 2 weeks. But I even heard that there was even someone that's sitting on the front row that I heard after about a month was like, yeah, I kind of needed some people. I remember this.
Also back row.
Also back row. Steph liked being secluded for a moment, but then was like, no, I need people. We are not meant to be alone. Now, there are many people who never get married. They spend their entire lives enjoying healthy relationships with friends and family that are not alone. I think of like Miss Bev, right? She's a great picture of this. Now, on the other hand, there are many people who never get married, they never date, they never have children, they never spend, they spend their entire lives alone, and sometimes they're depressed. That's not good because we're created for companionship. So again, 2020 showed us this. It showed us that we are supposed to interact with other people. God made us this way. It's not good for man or woman to be alone. One of the greatest punishments of the criminal justice system is solitary confinement. And I can tell you, again, I used to be a jailer. What? Yeah. Great
You were in
training.
jail, Bryce?
I was in jail. I have been in jail for 2 years, if I do the math. I've done 2 years, not quite consecutive, but I was in the jail
2
for
years
4.
of jail you can do for that. See what you can do to get 2 years of jail.
I got paid. But I was still in a room with 4 people that was about 14 by 10 instead of the 10 by 10. But I also had double people in it because they only had 2 in their cells. We had 4, and we only had a few more feet. But I can tell you, when we stuck people in isolation, it did some weird stuff to people very quickly. Oftentimes, that's when people would start yelling and screaming, and they would freak smooth out because they didn't have anybody to be with. Now, they typically, that was a punishment, or that was because of how they were acting. They got put in isolation to start with. But it typically, it didn't take long for something in them to switch, and they needed people to contact them and to be with. I can't tell you how many times I'd sit for hours hearing them. They had a little buzzer they could press in their cell, and if I would activate it, all I could hear was the clicky part. Otherwise, it would ding if I didn't activate it. But I'd hear click, for like an hour straight or longer of them trying to reach out to someone, and I'm watching them on the camera, they're fine. But isolation, it messes with us. And sometimes we self-isolate, right? Sometimes we block everybody else out from us. And so many people that they've gone crazy in isolation. Steph and I, we like watching this show called Alone, where they take people, they stick them in the wilderness. You have 10 contestants, and they're typically survival experts. They have some ability of survival. And they're told, hey, up to a year, go. And this is not like Survivor where they've got a tribe or anything like that. No, they are all alone. They literally drop them off by boat or by helicopter or something like that. And they go, this is your area, go. And they've got 10 items. They have like a backpack, and then they film themselves.
How do they charge the battery?
Their battery, or they've got the solar stuff to charge them. And they before this, they do an extra training where they're like taught how to use the cameras and all that. But yeah, they've got batteries that are charged through the sun and stuff. They do have a oh crap button that they can press. The moment they press that button, people come get them.
I press that for no reason.
No, because you do that and you're out.
Okay.
You're done. They also have a satellite phone. They're supposed to keep the satellite phone, and they're supposed to keep the oh crap button on them at all times. Because there's some weird stuff that's happened. One chick, she was fishing, and she got a hook stuck through her hand, and it got caught underneath the tendon, and she couldn't get it out. There's another guy that he killed a bull ox with a improvised knife that he made.
That guy was crazy.
Yeah, he was psycho, but he won. He better with that. There's another dude that killed a moose, but he still was dying because, like, he was starving himself because there wasn't enough fat in the meat, and he needed fat. It was interesting, but anyway, it is fun to see the psychosis. Like, there's one dude that, like, he's from Lincoln, Nebraska, and he went crazy because of the mice that were in his tent. And he's like freaking smooth out because of these mice. And he came back and did it again. And did he win the second time?
No, he still lost.
He got really close, but like I felt bad for the dude because he's just going crazy because of these mice, and he's like losing his mind, literally.
That's when he was cussing at the tree was the best
Yeah,
part.
yeah.
I would do that.
But it's just really interesting at how the brain works. And they did one season where they allowed like couples, and it could be siblings, it could be a couple, it could be best friends. But what they did is they would, in this scenario, they took one and dropped them at their endpoint. The other one, they dropped like, I think it was 5 miles away, something like that. And they said, here's the coordinates, go. And some of them, it took them a day to get there. Some of them it took like 5, 6, 7 days, 10 days. Some never got there because they like broke their ankle on the way. I'm not kidding. But it was interesting to see the dynamic because once they got with their significant other, it was so much easier for them, and they all lasted significantly longer. They're basically told, hey, you've got a year, go. And typically what happens is I tap out, I'm the second to last guy, and like 2 days later they'll go do a welfare check on Corbin, and what Corbin doesn't realize is as Corbin is getting his weight done and all, because if you lose so much weight you get taken out. But what he doesn't realize is his mom is behind him on she came in a different way, and she'll come around a corner and he'll be like, dude, what the crap? And she's like, you won. So it's kind of interesting how that works. But I divulged this and go off this really weird bunny trail because isolation, it does some weird stuff to us. And so we need to be careful that we are not self-isolating. Some people, when we isolate, they die of starvation, but not the lack of food, not the lack of companionship or human contact. But the human contact, it goes a long ways to help us in that. Again, when they had the couples together, they did significantly better, lasted significantly longer than the other groups, just because they had somebody else going through it with them. Ecclesiastes 4 verse 9 says, Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their efforts. For if either falls, his companion can lift him up, but pity the one who falls without another to lift him up. Well, life is so much easier when you have somebody by your side. So we're going to break into small groups, and I want us to discuss how we can be that better friend, and then also who those better friends are in our lives. Steph, how many do we have? Do we know? Allie, do you know how many we have?
17 or 18?
14.
13?
13? I got
14.
I counted 14.
13 students.
Or it's not 14. Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. we
13
don't count
students.
13 students. First an adult.
So 1 of 6, 1 of 7?
Yeah.